Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
This is Kinda Murdery Insomniac. Stories to stay awake by. Hey everybody, welcome to Kinda Murdery Insomniac. Stories to stay awake by. I'm your host, Zevin Odelberg. As always, thank you for deciding to be here. Now, if this is your first time listening to the show, please subscribe. And whether it's your first or you're a long-time Legionnaire, please do leave us a review, tell your friends about us, engage with us online. It helps so much to grow the Legion and to ensure that the bloodshot eye stays open, unblinking, restless, and sleepless forever. As I've talked about before, I have cerebral palsy, and I would like Kinda Murdery to be a community where people with disabilities can feel seen and heard. So, if you or someone you know is living with a disability and you'd like someone to talk to, please reach out to the show, kindamurdery@gmail.com. And if you know a Kinda Murdery story that you'd like to hear on the show, either your own or something historical, anything you like, please reach out again via email, kindamurdery@gmail.com, and let me know. And of course, if I tell your story, I'll shout you out on the show. Now tonight is not a regular episode of Insomniac. It's a very special show. Tonight, Insomniac presents Middle-Aged and Creeped Out. That's Mako, M-A-A-C-O, Middle-Aged and Creeped Out. Now the guys, Todd, Sean, and Nate, they're doing, on this episode, one of their guest chat episodes, and who should they choose to interview but your very own Insomniac Centurion? That's right, yours truly. I am being interviewed over the phone, so if my audio sounds a little different than you're used to, that's the reason. But hopefully you're intrigued by the near endless possibilities of all the wild stuff I might say, and what even crazier stories those things I say could spark. So, with very much gratitude to Todd, Sean, and Nate from Middle-Aged and Creeped Out, and with my invitation, please do enjoy this episode of Middle-Aged and Creeped Out, and please do subscribe and review both to Kinda Murdery and to M-A-A-C-O. That's Middle-Aged and Creeped Out. Take it away, Todd, Sean, and Nate.
Hello there. Are you ready to hear tales of the paranormal, weird, unexplained, and just plain creepy? If the answer is yes, then welcome to your worst nightmare. But be warned, there's no turning back. Now here are Todd, Sean, and Nate, and they are middle-aged and creeped out.
Hey creepies, welcome to episode number 60. Nate is your sound engineer, and we are your hosts, Todd and Sean, and we are middle-aged and creeped out. Sean, what's going on, brother?
Nothing too much, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be back.
Oh,
I missed you guys last week.
It's almost like, oh.
Yeah.
You can feel the Triforce.
Can you feel it? Yeah.
I can.
It's a force, all right.
Honestly.
It's something.
I stopped at the door, and I just felt...
I saw
like,
that.
I did. It was almost like a holy moment, like... I'm back. We're back.
I know.
It's great.
We missed you 2 weeks ago, and then I was gone. But and you guys held the fort down, did well.
Are you still living?
Yeah. Oh man, that was rough.
Yeah.
Olivia and I,
both
my poor
right.
baby girl got it really bad.
I'm glad you're both better.
Yeah, and I was not feeling good. So.
And our pillar of strength.
And Nate.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get to you. How are you, man?
Doing good.
Doing good.
Yeah.
Nate being the only consistent presence for our podcast.
That's right.
And Dane, his son, did an awesome job.
Did awesome. He did. Yes. Dane also, there was something that I wanted to mention with him that he, after we got done with the gargoyle talk, he said, Oh my gosh, I forgot to mention the Darth Vader gargoyle. There's a Darth Vader gargoyle in the Library of Congress or something in DC.
Like a Darth Vader gargoyle?
I think I forget what it's on. I wanted to say like the White House or something, but it is on. I think it's the Library of Congress or some cathedral or something. But it is Darth Vader, and if you look it up, so you look up Darth Vader, Washington D.C. gargoyle. It's there. It's awesome. So he's like, oh, I meant to mention that. I'm like, I will totally bring that up.
Wow.
So we appreciate him being thorough.
So I'm glad, yeah. And I want to say, Dane, thank you. Whenever you listen to this episode, thank you for filling in. Did a great job.
Yeah,
good contributions,
awesome.
And it sounded like he was into it. He sounded like he had fun.
He's given you 5 more episodes, and then he's taken over permanently.
That's what I figured. Yeah.
He didn't know what to do with his hands. So.
He didn't know, well, it came through, to be honest with you, through the microphone. I'm like, he doesn't even know what to do with his hands. I mean, he's doing a good job, but...
Funk. That was me.
No, he did a good job. And so thank you guys for keeping the train rolling, as I said. So appreciate it, giving me a night off because I was not feeling well.
With all that craziness, though, I do want everybody to sign a petition. Yeah. I'm the only one on there that signed it so far, but it is a petition to stop the moon or take out the moon, whatever you want to call it, because I think this last full moon...
Oh, sharks with laser beams on their heads.
That frickin' laser beams on their heads. Laser beam. How hard is it? So I don't know how many people have an affinity for the moon, but today and right now, I don't. So
okay.
I know you're out there, and I'm taking you down.
Giving that ugly look, that dirty look. Giving the moon the stink eye.
I got to blame somebody for all this craziness. So
I guess.
Anyway,
all right.
It's just a side. That's a side bit.
I hear you. So I don't forget, I'm going to give you my stat. Now, I have decided I'm not going to call it the sinister stat.
Oh, okay. What do you
because I think that is too... if it was just strictly that type of stat,
okay,
just the creepy, scary.
Yeah.
Because it's not. So I'm gonna come up with a name. Huh?
Oh, yeah.
I haven't thought of it.
The stat.
Yeah. So it's right now.
Stat moment.
It's Todd's stat of the night. No. I have no idea. I'll come up with a name.
Stat's great, actually.
Yeah. How about this? My stat. You like that? Okay. But here is the stat.
Information stat.
Yeah, I like that. All right. So this is kind of gross, but I absolutely believe it.
We do gross.
The global rate for washing hands after using the toilet is under 20%. There you go.
I can attest to that because when I go into public bathrooms, I see it is. It's like 9 out of 10 people walk out the door. Movie theaters, sports arenas, whatever. Work. It's like, oh, dude, you're not going to. Okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah. So under 20% globally. When someone uses the toilet. So there you go, creepies. Ugh. Enjoy shaking that hand up.
Gross stat.
Yeah. That is a gross stat.
That's you know what, I might just name each stat its own. That's the gross stat of the episode. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
So there you go. Mr. Sean.
Yes.
What do you got for us?
I have the first part of the announcements. And so I always want to tell you guys to make sure and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok now, and we have a new competitor. It's not competitor. It's it's a venue. How about venue?
It all works for us.
It's Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used the joke. I said we're now woofers and tweeters.
Yeah. You know what? I did
and
like
you're
that.
like, oh my gosh, Sean. Seriously, I got to go back.
I was like, you know what? This might be the last episode.
Throw him out. He is not the leader. No,
that was good.
So follow us on all those. We have groups. We would love to interact with you on those. So come aboard. We always want to give out. It is so important to us to be a mental health advocating community. So we always want to give out these substance abuse and mental health hotlines. Well, the first one, as I take a gulp, is 1-800-662-4357. And we also want to give out the Suicide Veterans and Bullying
there you
hotline.
Go.
I like that. Is 1-800-273-8255. Or you can text hashtag, because I'm getting to be good at hashtags, 838-255. And also the bullying website, which is stopbullying.gov. I am getting very good at that.
Yeah.
Don't stop bowling. Please stop bullying.
Thinking about tomorrow.
Always go bowling.
Yes.
But don't you go bullying.
I hate to admit this, but I'm the Twitter guy-ish, sort of. I'm trying. Anyway.
You're the Twitter guy.
So I'm figuring, I asked Todd right away, I'm like, how do hashtags work? I apparently also don't know how @ works either.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
I'm
this guy.
Social media literate, but I'm getting better.
We'll get him there.
I want to say real quick,
yes.
Don't you go bullying people bowling. That's even worse. Don't you go to
bowling
a bowling alley.
That's the most
exactly a bowling.
That's
bully.
just pure evil right there.
Wow, what's going on here? Okay, I'm glad I'm back.
What the what?
Yeah, say it what?
So what?
All right. Thank you for that. Good job. Good job.
You're most welcome for that.
So I am going to mention. I don't know if I've mentioned in a while, but we still have segment sponsorships that we will. Yeah. So anybody has a business or even personal, just want to sponsor, help us out, help the show out, get your name mentioned, and then if you do have a business, brick and mortar. I know Sean likes my brick and mortar.
I love that term.
Just get a hold of us, email us, or message us, however you want to do it. So we have those, $50. There's no contract needed. The other announcement I want to make, it is, so what do we got? What is today, guys? What is it? Seriously, what is 20?
I should know. I wrote it, typed it a couple times. 27th.
Okay.
27th.
Look at my phone.
So we are just, 2 or 3 days away from May.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting close to the live show.
Yes.
The indie live show sponsored, the main, obviously, Hillbilly Horror Stories. Live from Indianapolis. It's, yeah. I should have done that for a living.
I don't know. You missed your calling. I
know.
This podcast stuff.
So I'm doing this. Yeah, this is, no. So we want to mention, again, Saturday, July 16th from 6 to 10 p.m. here in Indianapolis. The host show, the main show, is Hillbilly Horror Stories. And they have asked us and the Tragedy of Cinema podcast to be a part of it. We're still excited about that. Guys, tickets are definitely available. We want to see as many creepies and hillbillies and tragedies. I don't know what they call themselves, but cinemies, tragics.
There you go. That's good.
Please come out and meet us, and I guarantee, I'm going to guarantee you're going to be entertained.
Oh, yeah.
Between Tragedy of Cinema, Hillbilly Horror Stories, and us, you're going to be entertained. And are
we going topless? Is that what we talked about?
We said we're going to entertain them, not gross them.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So anyway, don't listen to what Sean. Yeah. Oh, okay, I get you. I see where you're going there.
Yeah.
I'll dress up as the Blob.
I think that was toddless, but no.
Yeah, I like when you guys said you guys were toddless, and I say what?
Yeah. What are you saying?
You are toddless.
Watch your mouth.
So yeah, please, if you haven't gotten your tickets,
one more please.
Go to the Hillbilly Horror Stories website. You can purchase them there, or go to the Eventbrite, EVENTBRITE website. Just click on the Indie Live Show, and you can buy tickets that way. So
go get you something.
Yes, because we really want to have this happen. So yeah. Anyway, I just had to mention that, and you're going to hear it every week from now on because we're getting close. So back to you.
Be prepared. Back to me.
Be prepared.
Yeah. Well, we are on episode 60, which is mind-boggling. I know we get to these numbers and we're like, are you serious? We're at this number? So our main episode, number 60. And tonight we have had an amazing guest chat with a friend of the show, also a fellow podcaster, and you are going to enjoy this. So here you go, creepies.
Hey, guys. We have another awesome guest chat for this episode for you. We know you're going to enjoy. He is a fellow podcaster, and his podcast is called Kinda Murdery. I know you're going to love it. This gentleman is very smart, funny, and he is truly one of the good guys. And dare I say, he has the best laugh in the podcast business. He is the one and only Zevin Odelberg. And Zevin,
my goodness,
how are you, sir?
Gosh, I'm doing really, really well. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Although I got to say, I work or have worked in the sales capacity, and they always say, under promise and over deliver. And I feel, Todd, like you may have just over promised a little bit on that intro, and so I hope I can deliver for you guys.
I have no doubt.
But he did get the laugh out of you.
Yeah. There it is, Zevin, the golden laugh. And let me say, you have a great voice. You have a great podcast voice, so that goes along with it. So, and that is.
Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you to say, and I think podcasting is a blessing, especially for all of us who maybe grew up wishing we could be on the radio and never figured out how to do that, right? And I feel like that's part of the deal for me. Was I always thought it would be really fun to be on the radio, but had no idea how to break into that business, or at least didn't get started soon enough. So now we all get to have podcasts and live our radio dreams.
There you go.
That's really cool.
That's true. That is true. When my buddies and I, we were in middle school, and there's a local high school on the west side of Indianapolis, and it's actually the high school my brothers and my sister went to. So we were in like 7th, 8th grade, and we would listen to that station. So they had the high school had a radio station, and we would, during the summer, we would call in and request songs. just to hear our voice. Like they would
Exactly.
play, or they would say, "Hey, this song is requested by Todd and Wayne, from Speedway, Indiana." Because I just want to hear. Yeah, I just either want to hear my voice
like
or
the
my
two
name.
guys calling into the Wayne's World show.
Yes,
That's right. Podium. Excellent.
and we would call over and over, and they would say like these two again. So that's true, man.
It's funny. I did the same thing in my hometown.
Oh my gosh.
And it was
We
like
did
Friday
all-
nights we could call in for requests, and I got on there one time, and then I just froze. I was like,
Oh, we did.
"So,
man.
caller, are you still there?
Yeah.
Are you still there?
That's
Sean,
awesome.
is that you?"
Yeah, but that's true. Yeah, we get to live out our dream. That you're exactly right. So Zevin, thank you though for coming on our show. We really appreciate you taking your time.
Absolutely.
So
Thanks for having me.
it's,
Yeah,
it's
thank you for
definitely our
being here.
pleasure. Let's get into this. Why don't you tell our listeners, our creepies, a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of spill into how did you get into the podcasting and the true crime genre specifically?
Well, yeah. Like many people, I think, who started podcasts or at least started developing podcasts during the pandemic, to some degree, my podcast was a child of the pandemic. But I maybe have a little bit of a different story, which is that I have a close friend who is a writer, director, producer, and he lives in New York. And so in about April of 2020, when COVID was just going bonkers in New York and you could watch the news and they were stacking body bags in the streets, it was just a mess. And I called him up because I just wanted to make sure that he was okay and his family was safe and everybody was doing all right, And they were, thank God. I called him around Easter and we started chatting, and he said, I've started a production company and we were going to do TV, but now the pandemic's happened and all you can really do is podcasting. So we're pivoting to podcasting. And our company's called Criminal Content, et cetera, and we're going to do crime shows. And I said to him, without realizing I was pitching a show or anything, I was like, oh, yeah, really? I've had this idea for a crime show that's been percolating in my head for a couple of years now. And the first season of the show was set in the Mojave Desert. And so I told the story of the genesis of this idea. I had gone to Vegas with my family, including my young daughter and her friend. They were like 6 at the time. And when we were driving back from Vegas, of course, Parent of the Year takes the 6-year-old to Las Vegas for spring break, but that's a whole other story. So we're you're driving to Vegas and it's dark and you can't really see the desert. And you're thinking about hitting the craps table or whatever it is that you like to do, seeing a Cirque du Soleil show, and your mind is filled with the glamour and the glitter and the lights, and you're just kind of waiting to get there, and you break over the ridge and you see it, and you're like, wow. Well, when you drive back in the daytime usually, and the glamorous velvet curtain of night has been lifted, it's a very different reality than what you're sort of dreaming of on the way there. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of abandoned ghost towns, and then not abandoned ghost towns, a lot of, sort of silver airstream. I mean, for lack of a better word, I would call them meth trailers. You think they might be abandoned until you realize, well, no, only one of those windows is boarded up, so somebody probably lives there. So What happened was we're driving and we're hungry and we need gas. And in the short distance, 300 yards away, I see a gas station and a Coco's diner. And so I say, hey, let's get some gas, let's get some food. And I pull off at the exit to go get gas, and then we're going to eat at the Coco's. And as I pull up to the gas station, I realize that the gas station and the restaurant are entirely abandoned.
Oh my gosh.
And not only that, they are covered in absolute rainbow vomit of super intense, explicit graffiti. Whether that's like giant Dayglow genitalia,
It's the best kind, right?
Anarchy symbols, unfortunately some swastikas, your fair number of like, call this number for a good time, like just all the sort of all this sort of, what's the best way to put this? It's like the desperation and anger of frustrated life has been puked up all over this abandoned concrete. And I've got these little girls in the car and my wife in the car, and we thought we were going to get gas and food, and now neither of that is here, and there's nothing to rest your eyes on that's even the least bit appropriate.
Yeah, right.
And so I basically hop back in the car, throw it in reverse, like burn rubber back out to the highway, and when we hit the highway, I turn to my family and I say, well, geez, that was kind of murdery. And which leads me to a sort of philosophical point that I make occasionally on my show, and I think is important for people to hear, which is that for me, that little bit of humor injected into calling that kind of murdery, that's sort of my defense mechanism and or way to deal with trauma. I mean,
yes.
Some people laugh, some people cry, some people become furious and outraged, and sometimes I feel like we're at a moment in our culture right now where there can be this expectation of a homogenized traumatic response, meaning that if something awful happens, the only way for a decent person to respond to that awfulness is to proclaim their horror, express their empathy, and just make sure that everyone knows that they're on the right moral side of this issue and they're just as upset about everything as you might be. Mm-hmm. And that's a completely legitimate response, just like humor, just like any other response. But sometimes I feel like embedded in that response is an implicit judgment of anyone who might have a different emotional reaction to something frightening or traumatic. So I like to tell people that, hey, if dark humor helps you through dark times, if occasionally laughing at something you shouldn't laugh at helps you deal with it, that is okay.
Right.
Like, trust that you have a good heart and that will shine through, and don't feel the need to performatively react the way that certain sections of our society seem to require you to.
Or programmed, right?
I agree.
Right.
I think that's really, I think that's fascinating. And when you just kind of said something that's interesting. Today, I worked with a patient who's, just like one of the worst case scenarios. He's got all these things going on. And he may have cancer, all this kind of stuff. So we're working with him. I'm an occupational therapist, so we're getting this guy up, talking to him, trying to get a feel for, what kind of personality he has. I tend to go towards humor unless, like, the people just absolutely, it's making their situation worse. But that's how I deal with these kind of unpleasant situations, too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I told him, I said, my grandfather always said, you either laugh or you cry. And he goes, yeah, I prefer the laughter. And I told him, I said, when you're feeling well, I can tell you have an impeccable sense of humor. And he goes, I like to think I do. But I was like, you can, even when people are at their lowest, you can still see these like glimmers of humor. And it's like, as human beings, it's like you have to just sometimes laugh at yourself when you are in these buckets of, let's be not horse manure, buckets of crap.
Yeah.
That could be life sometimes,
It's absolutely true. And I also think that I feel like sometimes that I feel difficult things too much. Like, I may sometimes come across as callous about stuff, but in reality, I'm very much the opposite. And so I think that, there's coping, there's the defense mechanism, but there's also, because I feel things very deeply, it's never really occurred to me to feel the need to try to prove to other people that I'm having the correct emotional response to something.
I think that's awesome.
And so sometimes I wonder if folks who are, oh my God, that's just awful, blah, 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 you can't, like that just really want to make sure you know where they stand. Mm-hmm. I sometimes go, well, do they know where they stand? Like, it's like the Shakespeare line, methinks the lady doth protest too much.
You're right.
Like,
that's a good point.
If you feel the need to like scream to the heavens about all the empathy and rage and sorrow that you're feeling, is it maybe because you're not really feeling it, but you're supposed to?
Right?
Exactly. Bingo.
that moment when you realize you are soulless.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I think out of all of this craziness that we've come through, and humanity is very vast right now. I mean, it's huge, and there's so many of us. I mean, we got a lot of people here, but I think some of the best of humanity is going to eventually come out of this. I think some of the best humor, some of the best creative, and imaginative stuff is going to come out of this period. We'll eventually find it. I think we already are. Like you said, your podcasts are coming out of it, and people really, at their worst, they're digging deep to figure out what is truly authentic about them. That's what, when I hear you saying that, I hear authenticity, and I'm telling you, that's what I do nowadays. And when people come against me and like try to say, you're not, you really don't care, you don't worry about it, it's like, dude, I'm trying to help you. If I don't have the energy for it. There's a really good quote I heard within this last week that was, if it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't give it more than 5 minutes of your emotional attention. And I've been trying to I'm thinking that's a good piece of advice. It really is.
Yeah, it is. And I have a great aunt who is in her 90s, and she is old enough. She lived through the scarlet fever epidemic in Los Angeles in the 1930s. And we have old black and white photos of her as like a 3-year-old in a quarantine because of scarlet fever. And back then it was just you're quarantined and you can't leave the house. And they literally wrote the word quarantine in red paint on your house.
Wow.
And so you see this little girl sort of peeking over the windowsill. But what she likes to say is, if nobody's horrifically injured and nobody's dead, everything's going to be fine.
Yep.
Ultimately.
Right.
Like, to take nothing away from how you feel right now or how hard it is right now, but once you get the perspective of 90 years of life, I think she knows that time really does heal all wounds to some extent. And so it's basically akin to what you're saying, which is, if the fundamental things in your life are in place and nothing that means the world to you has been destroyed or horrifically altered, then it's probably not worth going through the roof about.
Exactly.
That's right.
Although that's not a lesson that I'm able to follow very well. I tend to get super pissed about all that.
I think we're all
I hear
like
you.
that
I get
at some
triggered
point.
too.
Yeah. And I'll lay, Zevin, I'll literally lay in bed at night, say I come home late from work, or my wife's in bed. She's been in bed for an hour or two, whatever. The kids have, obviously, and then our dogs are in bed. I'll come home and I'll finally be able to put my head, lay it on the pillow, and I'm like, I'm exhausted. Maybe things upset me during the day, or I read this on, whatever, TikTok and Instagram, got all worked up. And then I'll lay there and go, look, everybody's in bed. We're
all safe. Yeah.
Yeah. The door, we're good. We're good. You know what I mean? And I get worked up about all kinds of stuff, but I'm like, ultimately the day was good. And it ended great. Everybody's safe. Nobody's, I'm not at the hospital with a sick kid or a dying wife, or, nobody got, that's exactly like you said. It's ultimately going to be okay.
I can always tell when I'm off of my center because my wife will let me know. And she
don't they all?
Normally it's not very it's not like, hey honey, let me tell you, although she, like, the most subtle she's been recently was, I think you need to meditate more, because I used to meditate a lot, and then that helped. And I've been, she's like, I think you need to meditate more. I'm like, really? Am I that off balance? Like,
or medicate.
Yeah, I think she said, you're right.
In my case.
You know what? I think she did say medicate.
No. Hey, and Zevin, so when you said, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, please.
Well, I didn't want to forget. So so I liked your description of you put it in reverse, quick like to get the heck out of there, and that from the what you thought was going to be a restaurant and a rest stop and all that. Like, so you said, wow, that was kind of murdery. Like, how quickly did you go, wait a minute?
That's a great name for a podcast.
Yeah, seriously. Like, when did that?
I sort of chuckled uncomfortably, and then we're driving through these sort of ghost towns of the Mojave Desert, and I was like, Netflix ought to make a documentary called Kinda Murdery: Ghost Towns of the Mojave Desert, where somebody takes a camera crew and goes to these sort of mirage Airstream trailer abandoned towns where clearly some people do still live, but for the most part they are a sort of skeleton monument to the exuberance and optimism of the post-war early 1950s, when everything felt possible, including building the American dream in the middle of a desert that's only a shade more hospitable than the Sahara. In other words, there should never have been towns here.
No, that's right.
But we won World War II, giant economic boom. Future seems limitless, and they're just like, hey, let's start building towns everywhere. Well, you know,
Sprinkle a little mob in there.
The promise of that time did not really pay off.
Sure.
And I thought it would be very fascinating, you know, assuming you could do it safely, to explore who's living here and what is life like and what are their stories. But I always saw it as like a television documentary. And then it just kind of percolated in the back of my head until I had this phone call with my friend. And when I pitched it to him, he was like, yeah, let's make that show. And I was like, oh, really? Wow, great. So we made the first season, and it was great fun working with everybody. But ultimately, we had sort of different visions of the show going forward. On my end, I felt like I could do that I needed to be in a space where I was just kind of mostly working on my own and being my own sort of editor and voice, as opposed to, because I don't know if you've listened to the first season at all, but I have like a crew of almost Howard Stern-esque guys.
Yeah.
And they're great. And I love working with them, but I was feeling like I needed to strike out on my own. And also, just from a production standpoint, it was a blessing to be with the company. I never would have started a podcast without them. But when you're working with a company, there's a lot of, natural administration and bureaucracy where you get a recording back and your development executives want to give notes to, and then you give notes. And then there's a back and forth about what you should keep and what should go, and et cetera, et cetera. And we were basically struggling to do an episode every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Because of the layers of bureaucracy. Right. I can't say that.
Yeah. And then I, coming from my media background of analytics and marketing, I did a deep dive into the podcast space. And I was like, well, a couple of things. One is that every podcast that's successful at all releases at least once a week. And in general, they release twice a week. They have their main show on one night, and then they have a shorter or slightly different format version of the show on a different night of the week. Like, everybody who's succeeding at all does that. And the second thing is, it's really hard to start getting traction until you have at least 100 episodes, so that you have a sizable library for each new listener you convert to bounce around in.
Yep.
And once I realized those things and I started doing the math on releasing an episode every 2 weeks, I was like, geez, I don't have 4 years to wait to get to 100 episodes. So I basically said, love you guys, thank you, but I need to strike out on my own. And I did. And so that's kind of Murdery now. And this season, the first season was the Mojave Desert. This season is the Emerald Triangle, which is the area of the Pacific Northwest where I specifically grew up. So it's very personal to me. It's called the Emerald Triangle because it's responsible for 60% of the marijuana production in the United States every year.
Yeah.
Obviously, yeah. And I grew up off the power grid with all wood heating, wood cooking, solar and water power in the forests of Humboldt County. So that's the world that I grew up in. But of course, like anywhere else, there's a lot more to it than just pot, and one of the things there is, and one of the things I found doing the show Kind of Murdery, is that everywhere you walk, we're walking on about 6 inches of earth beneath an unlimited number of skeletons.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, you can grow up in the most bucolic, Norman Rockwell, safest feeling little town in America. And frankly, the town of Arcata in Humboldt, where I went to high school, felt that way. I mean, I never felt unsafe. or anything once, and I would be walking the streets after midnight when I was in high school. However, if you dive into the history of places, you find that absolutely everywhere, and often in the safest seeming places, people are just getting murdered willy-nilly. People are disappearing. There's a higher level of sort of paranormal and cryptid kind of activity. I mean, just all kinds of really compelling stories, true crime, with a smattering of paranormal, which I've been inspired to do by becoming friends with Jerry and Tracy Polly from Hillbilly Horror Stories, and you guys, and this wonderful sort of crew of podcasters that we have inspired me to be interested in the paranormal as well, although my show is by and large true crime, and beyond that I would even call it American history true crime.
Right.
Because I do a lot of in-depth research. I dive into newspaper archives, and I spend hours and hours and hours combing through primary resource articles from the time of whatever event I find until I can build the story. And I love doing that kind of research. I love telling stories that way. And one of the reasons I wanted to do it was that so many things are so easily Googleable today.
Right.
That I wanted to try to find stories that hadn't been infinitely rehashed on Reddit or somewhere else, which is to take nothing away from people that have wonderful podcasts that cull straight from the internet all the time. I felt this need, because I've always been a historical researcher, to try to, like, as much as I could, tell a story that maybe no one had ever heard before. So that was the other piece of it for me. And then the last part of it was, because the subject matter is so dark, and to be honest with you guys, I've never actually been someone in my life before the podcast who was particularly interested in horror or paranormal or true crime or any of that, because I'm a pretty sensitive soul, no matter how I actually present. And I would just kind of get too upset by all of these dark forms of entertainment. Mm-hmm. So makes part sense. Of the inspiration for Kind of Murdery was to try to be able to create a true crime show and tell true crime stories in a way that someone like me wouldn't feel like they needed to go take a shower afterwards.
Makes sense. It's hilarious that you say that, because that's exactly how I feel very, that like resonates with me, because I'm the same way. I like to dabble, but sometimes I feel like, I like to still stay on the light side. And listening to you, you can tell it's extremely polished. It's very researched. I love the history part of it. I like that. I'm like, okay, give me more, Zevin, because I enjoy that. And I like it when you're on the murdery part, and you even said in one of your the episodes that I was listening to, you're like, okay, now this is going to be more paranormal, so it's more on the kinda. And I was like, just that humor of being able to like be dynamic. I was like, oh, this is you hooked me. I was like, this is cool.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well,
I agree.
Thank you very much. And another piece of it, right, that I find that the history is very necessary for me is I do like to speak frankly and have my own take on events and the implications of them, etc. But I also don't want to obviously cause pain for a victim's family or cause somebody to rehash something horrible. I mean, as much as, of course, that sort of thing can always happen despite our best efforts. But one of the things that I really try to do to ameliorate that is find these historical stories, because if you're telling a story from 1920 or 1930, there's a pretty darn good chance that the people that were intimately involved perhaps have passed on, or most likely don't listen to podcasts. And so I can hopefully avoid, causing somebody to have to relive the worst experience of their lives. So it's a way for me to try to tell these horrible stories, sometimes with the dark humor that I had discussed, or with just kind of the brazen awareness that you're witnessing a human car wreck, which I think is part of what makes these stories so fascinating to people, whether we want to sort of admit it publicly or not. There's a fascination to horrible happenings and murder and just kind of the slow, if you've ever been in an accident, time just slows down, like,
Yep.
and you're like, you see everything sort of hyper real. And I feel like a lot of these awful stories are like that. And sometimes I want to be able to acknowledge the reality of that listening or telling experience, but again, hopefully not in a way that's going to be disrespectful or upsetting to victims or their families. And so therefore I rely often, usually, on the cushion of many years gone by in order to have a less sort of triggered emotional response.
Well, I think that's cool. No, yeah, I don't mean to interrupt there, but I wanted to tell you too, I think as a listener, because I feel, here's the interesting thing is, like, a lot of your listeners aren't going to get a chance to say, like, have a conversation like this. So I know that's my honor to be able to do that. But it's funny because you, in your show, you put people at ease, number one, and then you engage them, which I think is awesome. And it's like, I'm like, okay, I want to know what you think. And so there is that authority, like, okay, he's done the research, he knows. But it's really cool because that's why when we started talking, it's like, I already feel like I know you because your voice has been in my head multiple times. And it's just cool. But like I said, speaking as a listener, you do a great job of handling all that. Like what you're saying is really cool.
And that's what I was going to say.
Like you take great care.
Yeah. And to spin
I appreciate
off what
that
Sean said,
as a listener.
Sorry, but I would say to spin off what you said, that's why I think he does a great job. I never find myself cringing going, ooh, man, he really didn't show any heart in that or any,
he boofs that
like,
one.
Yeah. Like Zevin, you're telling the stories, you're telling the history, you're telling the facts, what happened. I never have gotten the perception of you're joking or thinking this is silly stuff. You'll have humor in your podcast, but it's not ever at the expense of a family's tragedy or an individual's tragedy, whatever. And that's hard to do. And you do a great job
that way. And I do think that there has been a learning curve on that for me. If I'm honest, I think that early on in the show, there's a tremendous learning curve for all of us who podcast, I think, to figure out to find our true voice and also to figure out what works best for our show. Mm-hmm. And I think that perhaps early on I was not always as tactful or as empathetic as maybe I would like to be. But I think that that's something that I had to learn and find and also come to understand that it was my sort of more authentic voice to try to be more that way. That's actually cool. I think early on I had that fascination with the just insane show of humanity that results in these, like, because some of these stories, there's a story on one of my relatively more recent episodes called the Decapitation of Eddie King that I did with Derek Hayes from Monsters Among Us podcast.
Yep.
And it was great fun to be on with Derek. And that story is just buck wild nuts. Like, go listen to it, Decapitation of Eddie King. But honestly, if you wrote this into a movie, people would be like, get out of here. That's so unbelievable. Yeah. That is nonsense.
Right.
So sometimes truth is way stranger than fiction, and some of these murders are like the horribly violent, murdery version of like watching the WWE or something. Like, it's that over the top and crazy. And if you don't believe me, Decapitation of Eddie King, check it out.
Yep.
So I think early on, I sometimes was a little bit more feeling like I was narrating a monster truck show and not always as aware that I was talking about human beings as I probably should have been. And part of that was I was like, well, I want to be fun. I want to be funny. I want people to feel engaged. And I think I had sort of this, well, I know it was a false idea that in order for someone to have fun and be engaged, that they need to sort of be laughing or, entertained in that way. Because, you guys, we podcast, and when you're doing it, if you get to hang with your buddies like you guys do, great. But a lot of times you feel like you're sort of talking into a void, right? And you don't have, like, I was a theater actor in college. So when you do theater, you've got some people in the audience, they laugh, they ooh, they ah, they clap. You get all these human reactions back at you that sort of tell you, okay, I'm doing good, right? Or I need to do better or whatever. And when I first started podcasting, and here we are, it's the pandemic, we're all on Zoom. and you don't have that human connection initially with your audience. And I think I felt like in order to feel like I was succeeding, I needed to, for my own security, like elicit direct reactions that a lot of the time were laughter. And for that reason, I was probably sometimes either making myself or encouraging others to make jokes that I maybe wouldn't make anymore. I think that was part of the learning process, and kind of realizing, no, you can entertain very successfully. You don't have to force the fun, force the joke, force the entertainment in order for this show to be good. Just tell the story and react, as you put it, Todd, authentically. But that was a learning process for me. Definitely, I'm not afraid to admit that.
No, I hear you.
I think the podcast, it is. It's like a living, breathing thing, and it does mature over time. I feel the same way. We were funny because we were trying to be so serious and like do research and be like polished, and then all of a sudden we just like started hitting these episodes where we were just kind of riffing, and we did bring the humor element into it, and we were like, oh, that's kind of funny, we should do that again. But there are times where it's we don't want everybody to come to us and like, oh, here's the silly guys, because I actually wrote this down for you. I see you have a command of your show. Like, that's what I wrote down. Like, there's a deep command of your voice, and you have control of that show. Even when you do a good job of bringing people in for interviews, and you make it very natural. Like, it's just easy. It's a conversation, and it's fun. I see us, like, sometimes I think of us like, oh, do we have a command? We might be like the Three Stooges in court, hello, 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 hello.
Well, and by the way, I love your guys' show too. But we're in a mutual admiration society here, and I think you guys have a wonderful dynamic.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that I think the audience always wants to feel is that they are a fly in the wall amongst friends hanging out.
Yeah, and we've been told that.
And I think for me, early on in my show, when I had a bunch of people sort of on with me, I feel like I was trying to force that feeling sometimes. I mean, look, there's a lot of episodes I'm very proud of early on, but there are times when I could definitely tell you that I felt like I was trying to force that feeling of friends just hanging out in a way that maybe wasn't authentic to me. You guys, on the other hand, I think you achieve that beautifully in a very authentic way, and the way that you guys care about each other and the stories that you tell. I mean, it really comes across. And
Thank you.
I think that's an absolute strength of your show.
Thank you.
I got to call out Nate. This last week, we had a couple of weeks where we weren't all three together. He knows what I'm going to say. So he messaged us the other day, and he said, because he normally doesn't, like, he'll reach out and answer things or whatever, but he's normally not he's a man of few words. But he said to us, he goes,
Sean and I message about 487 times
and the paragraphs are huge, and Nate said, these guys, when are they going to stop?
Yeah.
But he just put out there first, and he said, I'm just saying I miss you guys. And Todd's almost immediate reaction, because my wife was like, what are you laughing at? And I was like, Nate just said he misses us. And of course that gets me right in the feels. And Todd goes, are you drinking, and how much? And Nate's like, I'm not drinking at all. And I was like, I go, oh, that's really sweet, but you're probably drinking a lot.
Yeah. And I thought it was Sean, to be honest with you. When I saw the word, I didn't see who it was from.
He probably figured I was with him drinking.
I assumed it was Sean, and I was like, oh, Nate misses it. But I was like, are you drinking? Did you hit your head or something?
I wanted to get in the car and just give you guys a big hug.
But when I came up with the idea to do a podcast, and then I approached Sean, I said, I don't want to be reading. Like, we can have our notes and we have to have our research and know what we're talking about, but I don't want it to be scripted. Like, so as we talk about, just like you're presenting a story, presenting information, but it's got to be a conversational type, and I don't want to be so serious and just so rigid. And so I wanted to sound like somebody is sitting with us at a sports bar or at a restaurant, and they're so as the listener, I want them to. And so we've had that 2 or 3 times. People have said either in a review or, we'll get a message here and there, and they're like, it sounds like, we're listening to 3 friends talk about what, the paranormal or creepy stuff.
Because at the heart of it, we are.
And that's what I'm like, that is it. Right. That's what I wanted, now I think we do generally achieve that. But so I hope we can continue that, because I want to be serious enough to, not like you said, you'd laugh inappropriately or we'd never make fun of anybody dying or a family's tragedy, whatever. And typically we're not true crime, but there can be, obviously people that have really lived and then they got killed or died or whatever. And so, but we have to interject our humor and our natural selves to achieve what I wanted to. So you do have to be careful. Like you said, you have to, there's a balance there, and but I think so what you said makes me feel good. So I really appreciate that. I know Nate and Sean Zevin to say that. It really means a lot.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right about the balance. But then it's also true that, at least in the true crime genre, sometimes there are stories that are just so preposterous that you kind of have to laugh and be entertained. And I think that
you said the dark humor, yeah,
seriously,
yeah, and I don't like. It's like you don't want to be disrespectful to a victim, of course, but as a storyteller, if you have this incredible story in front of you, so many details of which might be entertaining or funny, it's a tough needle to thread. Where you also don't want your empathy or your awareness of how terrible this actually was to prevent you from telling the best story you can tell. And I think that kind of comes back to what I was saying early on about trust that you have the right feelings inside of yourself and that will ultimately come through. And you don't have to proactively prove it to people all the time. That's my philosophy. There's one story. I can tell a really quick version of it from season 1 of my show.
Oh, go for it.
It's called the Sunshine Travel Shop Murders. And so basically here's what happened. There's a place in the Mojave called Sema Road. And on Sema Road, there was a little mini mall. And in that mini mall was a postcard, souvenirs, travel shop, the kind of place you go in to buy like logoed sandals and keychains and cards, etc. We all know like the little tourist shop next to a truck stop type of deal, right? So there were other businesses in the mini mall too. And every week the armored car would come to the mini mall to pick up the cash from each of these businesses. Well, the manager of the Sunshine Travel Shop was a young guy. He was like 26 years old. I'm not remembering his name right now, but on this particular day, the armored car shows up, and I guess it's a big take that day. And maybe he sort of realizes it's a big take because it's a big take from his own shop, and he sees how much money the guy's carrying out of the other shops. But the long and short of it is it was something like 16 grand was extracted from the merchants and heading to the armored car. True. Well, it's somewhat humorous. This is the manager of the store thinks like, this is my big chance. I'm never going to get another shot at 16 grand in a lump sum. So he happens to have a .22 revolver, and he basically runs over and shoots the armored car guard non-fatally, but then takes the armored guard's .357 Magnum and murders him, which is awful.
Wow.
But gets away. Now we get to the fun part of the story. I mean, moment of silence for the armored car guard.
Right, yes.
Here's what happens. He takes that 16 grand, right? And what does he do? He goes out and he buys new stereo equipment, a set of white-walled tires,
yes,
and a freaking hang glider.
Yes.
So is this not the most like 80s story you have ever heard? In other words, I mean, he was all weekend long. He was binge watching like Breakin' 2 and Rad and all these, all these 80s movies. This is what I picture. And then he's like, man, I'm never going to get myself a freaking hang glider. And he gets the money and he buys a hang glider and he buys stereo equipment and these white wall tires. And you picture just this like strange high-speed contraption where he is sitting on the stereo equipment with the like white wall tires on wheels stuck to the boombox, like hanging onto the hang glider, just tear-assing down the desert highway while like Metallica's Ride the Lightning blasts from the sky like the word of God, you know?
He was, that was...
Evan, I've listened, so I'm cracking up over it. So I've listened. I'm all caught up on your podcast. What I did was I listened to your second season, and then I don't know why I do that. Usually I listen to like the first, and I go in order. But I actually listened to your second season, and then I went back and then I listened to your first season, and that story at first I wasn't quite remembering, and then when you said like what he bought, I'm like, oh yeah, and I remember your friends, they were like. Because you said even on the podcast, isn't that the most 80s thing that you've ever heard of?
Yeah. The best worst thing you'll hear.
That would be like giving. So me being a 51-year-old and then giving, and then I have an 11-year-old son. If you gave me $500 and gave him $500, it's probably going to look a lot different.
Oh yeah.
He's going to buy some baseball cards, a bunch of candy, and some Nerf bullets. I'm just saying, and it's like that's what I was picturing. Like, yeah, he goes out and buys a hang glider.
That was his heaven.
I mean, and yeah, white wall tire. Oh my gosh, that is great. Yeah, how can you not laugh at that? I mean, that's
I mean, right? Yeah, right. I mean, honestly, the traditional thing is right. You go down to the crossroads, and you sell your soul to the devil, and you sign a contract where you get basically all the earthly delights.
Yeah.
I want to be rich. I want to be famous. We've all seen the movies. There's more than one of them. Sure. I like the one where I think it ends up being Michael J. Fox cutting heads against Steve Vai or something. But anyway, there's also Bedazzled. So we all know about this concept, and I feel like the idea is if you sell your soul to the devil, then you can have whatever you want in the material world. Well, I would say that metaphorically or maybe literally, if you're going to murder someone to steal all their money, well, there you go, selling your soul to the devil.
Right.
What is sort of, I guess on the one hand sad but hilarious about this story was that what this guy sold his soul to the devil for was a hang glider, a new set of tires, and some stereo equipment. We've all got our price. Jimmy,
that was his.
And talk about just I mean, things you think, oh, okay, what are you gonna do?
Dear
put some
Lord,
in the bank,
that's what I'm going to bed tonight thinking. What would mine be?
Yeah, something that's really gonna. Yeah, and oh my gosh, the things he bought. I was cracking up just now, just like you did when I listened to.
They always say what if you didn't have to work, what would you do with your time?
Right.
And that it's a good judge of the character of the person. But man, that's crazy.
And Zevin, that is a perfect example of what you're saying. Like, what a horrible tragedy, and somebody got murdered, but then here comes the funny part is what he spent his money. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Crazy.
If we can't laugh at that because of how horrible it is that someone was murdered, and it is, then you're doing a disservice to the story.
That's right.
That could be a tough needle to thread, certainly, but that's what we're trying to do on Kind of Murdery is find a way. And sometimes our stories, by the way, if you listen to the shotgunning of Frida Beckley, some of the stories are just really, really sad and awful.
Right.
And you won't hear me laughing at all, but perhaps their details are still so incredible that I can't help but tell the story because it's almost like you're just walking through a museum of human depravity, and you're going to see, these evil masterworks that you never could have even dreamed existed.
Yeah.
But generally, I try to stay away from the really dark stories. Child murder, sex crimes.
Sure.
Right.
I try to avoid those things just because of how perilous it is and how horrible it is, and that I don't want to feel and live through those. I shouldn't say live through those things, but I don't want to emotionally travel through those things and necessarily be the one that leads the audience there too. Except occasionally I'll make an exception because I just find the story to be just that compelling. But generally, yes, I try to avoid things that are just horribly, horribly tragic, and to keep in mind kind of the traditional horror movie trope, right? Which is essentially horror movies are medieval morality plays updated for modern society. So what you see when you watch a traditional horror movie is that almost always somebody is committing one of the 7 deadly sins straight out of the Bible: pride, lust, gluttony, on and on. They're almost always committing one of those 7 deadly sins right before the murderer shows up and murders them, which was basically the format of the morality plays that the church was putting on in the Middle Ages. And so I try to be cognizant of that too, and that a lot of times stories where horrible things happen to people are more palatable, the horrible part, if you can find ones where they happen to pretty crappy people.
Yep.
A good riddance to them, right?
A better way to put it.
Right. Well, that has a great story.
It's better when the person who gets murdered is a criminal themselves, is the short way of putting it, right? Not better in a, I don't need to explain myself. You guys get what I'm saying.
No, absolutely.
Well, I think
avoid like innocent young girls getting murdered as much as possible.
Right. Exactly.
From the get-go with your logo, which is obviously draws you in. It's fantastic. I love it. And then there's kind of a wink, nod with the whole, just kind of murdery in itself is like, okay, I'm in on what's going on here.
Yeah, that grabs you.
Girl I work with, she's funny because we do fantasy football at work, and she's a huge sports fan. She grew up played baseball and all stuff, but she always names herself Little Stitious because she's superstitious. She's got the sports superstitious, so she's a little stitious. But that's what that kind of thing. It's like wink, nod.
Right.
Here's the joke. I love that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of I love being part of that.
And I'm going to say this too.
Yeah,
go ahead,
absolutely. Well, I will say though that I am very aware that I'm in the true crime genre, and a lot of the true crime audience, and I appreciate every audience member I have so much, does in fact really enjoy straightforward, serious, dark stories.
Right.
And so I didn't want to completely fail to deliver that either, which is why I created the Thursday night format of Kind of Murdery, which is Kind of Murdery Insomniac, stories to stay awake by.
That's where I was going towards. Yeah, I wanted you to tell our listeners about that. Yeah.
Yeah. This is Kind of Murdery Insomniac, stories to stay awake by. Yeah.
Love it.
Yes, that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I love them. I love those.
And those stories are just usually really awful, told really factually and seriously, and you won't hear me giggle or anything ever on that format of the show. It's a straightforward true crime show. I will say that occasionally I will mix it up and use it as an opportunity to present the podcasts of friends of mine that I think are really good, or maybe I will. Just recently, I did a reading of Edgar Allan Poe's Mask of the Red Death. Oh, so awesome. I do mix it up on Insomniac a little bit, but generally, generally it's going to be, a 15 to 30 minute hit of just a really dark, interesting true crime story that is taken very seriously and feels like a ripped from the headlines type of experience.
So I should not wait.
That's Kind of Murdery Insomniac.
Zevin, I should not wait for the Care Bears episode. Is that what you're telling me?
No, not on Insomniac.
Unless he gets murdered.
Sort of Kind of Murdery with my 10-year-old daughter, though, which is the one child-appropriate episode in the whole catalog. So
there you go.
If you want to listen with your kids, there's one for you.
There you go.
Remember I messaged you, Zevin. I heard the episode with, like I said, I'm all caught up, but your daughter did a great job. She was cracking me up, and she's a Spitfire, and she's got such a great personality, and she was really good on your podcast on the episode. She's so cute, but she's a little lady. She was something else. Like you talk about owning that episode. I think I think she did cool. That. I think that was hers.
Well, thank you.
I'm serious.
Certainly had fun recording with her. I'd like to do another one with her, actually. But I also think that perhaps that it's more charming for those of us who are parents than maybe it is if you're not. I don't know. I can't speak to that because obviously I totally agree with you. I think she's amazing, but it was a really fun bonding experience for us, and cool. I really enjoyed making that episode with her. So
she did a great job. Seriously, she was definitely not shy. She was not microphone shy, and she sounded like a natural. I'm like, I can see her podcasting sometime in the future. take after old dad.
She's a total ham bone. She takes after me in that regard.
That's how you raised her, right?
I picked that up right off the bat. I go, I
Yeah.
was just cracking up. I'm like, she does, but she did a really good job. She just wasn't like funny and cute, but I'm like, man, that little girl did pretty well. A lot better than I am.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think she deserves 99.99% of the credit for that, just all on her own, because that's who she is. But I also think that my wife and I had a very intentional set of parenting beliefs, which were built around our observation, because we lived in Los Angeles for, basically 15, 16 years, my wife even longer than that, and working in the entertainment industry. And what I would say that we both observed is that this modern world it's tough on everybody, but it's especially tough on young women. And I'm not going to elaborate on that too much, but that's how we feel. It's especially tough on young girls and young women, and that a city like Los Angeles, where you have sort of desperation, admiration, celebrity, all those sort of narcotics dripping from the walls, so to speak, is even tougher on young women than anywhere else where it's already not easy.
Right.
So we, even though she's already this way, we also wanted her to be, and encouraged her to be, strong and assertive and speak her own mind and have her own mind. And, we weren't worried about the gender of the toys that she wanted to play with, et cetera. A lot of times, look, the boys' toys, the Bosch tool set's just a lot more fun than the dolly.
That's great.
I think she's a total ham bone, and she's totally assertive, and that's just who she is. But that's also a quality that my wife and I did everything we could to foster in her, because we just felt like she would be better equipped to weather the world that she's inevitably living in and will live in going forward if she was that way.
I agree. You're doing a great job.
You did her a great service.
Tell your
too.
wife,
That's
yes.
awesome. Yeah.
You both are doing a great job. I could tell. It came through the mic, or the AirPods, I should say. Yeah. Zevin, I don't want to forget to ask you. So, do you have? I know we've been. Obviously, your podcast is true crime. As far as the paranormal, like, what do you? I don't know. Like, do you ghosts, cryptids, demons? What is your kind of go-to when the paranormal comes into play? And then, do you have any personal stories that you want to share with our listeners? Anything that you've maybe trying to figure out what happened, or anything like that?
Well, I would say so. First of all, Humboldt, where I'm from, is the Bigfoot capital of the world. There are many places. There are multiple places that sort of claim to be. But Willow Creek in Humboldt County actually is. I mean, it's not far from Willow Creek where the Patterson-Gimlin movie was filmed.
Okay, right.
We're all redwood. It's all redwood forests. I mean, I think that where I'm from has the strongest claim to being the home of Bigfoot. And so certainly we're very immersed in Bigfoot lore. As for myself personally, where I sort of land on paranormal stuff, I absolutely believe in ghosts, based on personal experience. And I absolutely believe in ghosts, harmless, benevolent. As far as cryptids go, I fall probably along the lines of what Shakespeare writes in Hamlet when he says, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy."
That's good.
And what I mean by why I would bring that up is that, oddly, because I'm such an opinionated person, I have an opinion on everything. I think I see the truth of things. A lot of times I probably don't. I probably just have like a, Dunning-Kruger syndrome or whatever that is. But but the reality is, hold on. I lost my train of thought for just a second. You have to clapping so you can easily edit this little ramble out.
That's all right.
Okay. Oh, I know where I was. Okay, here we go. But the truth about me is that I'm not somebody that needs in my beliefs certainty. And I can't explain why that is, but I've never really, some people feel so driven to uncover the truth of life and existence and spirituality and life after death and all of these things, which is wonderful. And I find myself to be very driven to uncover the truth of events and realities and interlocking political realities and all these. I want to get to the bottom of stuff like that. But when it comes to things that fall into the realm of faith, whether it's God and angels or ghosts and cryptids, I am okay with having faith in things without knowing for sure. So that's kind of where I would ghosts I absolutely believe in based on my own experience. Cryptids, I'm totally open to the idea that they could very well exist or did at some point. Mm-hmm. In fact, I had a. Did you say, Todd, that you're a physical therapist?
No, that's Sean.
An occupational, yeah. Don't.
Occupational therapist. Okay, so I have
Don't worry about it.
Physical therapist who's super duper into Bigfoot, and his belief is that Bigfoot is a nearly omniscient fourth dimensional being who can essentially manipulate our reality at will, which is why we never catch him.
Right.
But it's also why, and this is something that I talked about with Derek Hayes from Monsters Among Us, it's also why when you look into the Pacific Northwest, which is Bigfoot country, there aren't a bunch of stories about any other nasty creatures. We don't have the chupacabras, and we don't have the mirrored men and the dog men and the skinwalkers and all of these other sort of horrible supernatural creatures. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be so cocky as to say that the Pacific Northwest or the Emerald Triangle specifically doesn't have them, but we don't have the wealth of stories that you see coming out of other parts of the country about all of these other often malevolent supernatural beasts. Now, maybe that's because Bigfoot is just an egomaniac and wants everything to be about him, but I prefer to think that it's because Bigfoot is benevolent and essentially he's the warden of our little part of the world, and he keeps all the nasties out.
Ah, that's interesting.
That's an interesting way to look at
I
it.
do, and this sounds very funny, but we've talked about this. I just hope he's a listener. That's all I want.
Yeah.
Todd's not so sure about that.
Yeah. Nate's the Bigfoot guy.
Yeah.
Nate loves Bigfoot. So
It's funny that you say physical therapy because I get mistaken for a physical therapist all the time. So I get that. And I appreciate you not asking me to explain the difference because that'll take a minute. And but a friend of mine who's a physical therapist, Zach, came on our show and he had actually some experiences up in the Pacific Northwest. So it's and he is a believer. He's like, I mean, and the first thing he said was he's like a total science driven person, and this is totally something he can't explain, but he did explain talked about his experiences, and they're just like, yeah, I can't explain that. So yeah. I like that idea of, I always joke about being interdimensional, but I really think there is something to that. Mm-hmm. And to think about him being benevolent, I think that's pretty interesting.
Let's hope.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
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 That's true.
Yeah.
It's
if you guys want, do you want me to tell a personal ghost story?
Absolutely.
I've got a couple I could tell. I'll tell one of them. I'm not going to belabor the point, but if you want me to tell a story that demonstrates why I believe in ghosts, I can do that.
Yes, sir. Please do. Yeah.
Okay. So again, forgive me. I know, as you say, Todd, if you're all caught up, I am going to go ahead and borrow from my show's catalog, but this is a story that I told to Jerry on his show, and it happened to me very recently. And it's called The Roma and the Haunted Move. So extremely recently, my family decided to move to San Diego permanently. When COVID started, we lived in Koreatown in a historical house, but the area that we lived in was about 7 times denser than the rest of LA, and LA is already super dense, as you might imagine. So when the news of the virus first broke out at the middle of March, and nobody knew anything yet, with heads or tails, we felt like, well, geez, maybe we ought to put some distance between ourselves and the neighbors, because you could practically reach an arm out my window and touch the next house. Okay. And so we ran away down to San Diego, where my mother has a little beach cottage, and we thought we would just be down there for a couple weeks. And, stuff kept progressing, and I was working remotely, and so we just ended up staying longer and longer. And the upshot of it was we fell in love with San Diego and decided to move here permanently, as opposed to just continue to squat at my mom's house. And so we sold our house in LA. And this was a house that we never thought we would sell. We thought we were going to live there forever. We loved it, and we never intended to ever move. I mean, life changed in a hurry. I got laid off, then along comes the pandemic, and we decided to move. But the thing about this house, and this probably will sound even a little wackier to people than just believing in ghosts, but I also sometimes feel, I've always felt that certain inanimate objects have clear emotional personalities. And then it was later that I kind of tied that to ghosts and said, well, maybe the reason I feel like this house has actual emotional reactions to what's happening is because it has ghosts. And so that's sort of the foreshadowing of where I'm going to be going with this. When we bought our house back in 2011, it had if you think of a house as a person, it had an absolutely tragic history. In around the turn of the century, 1912, that part of Los Angeles where I lived was the Beverly Hills of the time. We're just east of Western Avenue, and Western Avenue was called Western Avenue because it was as far west as the trains went. So essentially, East Los Angeles was Los Angeles. And when you got to Western, a bit west of downtown, the city part of Los Angeles ended. And then it was just dirt roads to the beach from there. So the original kind of Beverly Hills area where movie stars lived around like 1900 to 1920, let's say, Beverly Hills hadn't moved west yet. This was the furthest west anyone had gone. And Hattie McDaniels, Charlie Chaplin, Louis Armstrong, various like big names from that era lived in the same neighborhood that I was in. Wow. Well, obviously cities change and evolve or devolve both directions very quickly. Places become different than they were. And by the time we moved in, I would call our neighborhood the sort of the front line of the war on the ever encroaching ghetto. And there's a Food for Less across the street from my house that burned down in the LA riots.
Oh God.
There's a lot of crime, a lot of things. Now, we never felt unsafe, but we also knew that it was not the kind of neighborhood where you go walking around the streets after dark. So our house, to get back to the point, had once been this like beautiful, big hybrid Victorian craftsman home built in 1912. And as time had gone on, it passed into different hands. Eventually, it became like a crack house. And then later, it was bought by a for-profit Korean university that illegally basically gutted it and turned it into classroom space. And then ultimately decided to sell it, but just did the sort of most hodgepodge slapdash, let's make sure we can get a loan remodel they could do. I mean, there were things like the upstairs bathroom there was no vanity cabinet below the sinks, and it wasn't even plumbed to the hot water. Like the guest bathroom had a standalone water heater sitting under the sink, fully visible right next to all the piping. I mean, it was just a mess. And so this house had been, very traumatized over the years, to go from a beautiful home where a family lived to being a crack house to being a illegal classroom space that could never even be used as a classroom space because the city we shut them down, and then it sat empty, and it was very poorly treated. And we bought it, and we made it into a beautiful home, and we never intended to move. We're raising our daughter there, and we were going to always live there. Mm-hmm. And so you can probably see what I'm sneaking up on, which is most haunted house ghost stories you're going to hear are about people moving into a haunted house and an angry ghost trying to chase them out. Uh-huh. And we had the opposite experience. So, and here's my belief on it. The ghosts that live in that house, and we believe that it was a elderly couple and a child, they experienced, because their spirits were imbued into the home, all of this trauma that the home went through. And then we came along and we made the house beautiful again, and we made it a place of fun and family and love and all of these things. And I think the house, or the spirits in the house, became, as much as you can when you're stuck between the veils, happy.
Yeah.
And we always felt that there was a real sense of watching over our daughter. But I also think that the ghosts liked my wife and my daughter better than me. And specifically, when we decided to move down to San Diego, the whole reason that was even possible was because my mom had a house down here that we could go live in while we were looking for our next home. And so indirectly, it was my fault that we were moving, because without my family, we wouldn't be. And so here are the sort of things that started to happen. Essentially, the upfront version is to say that all kinds of strange things to make us actually moving out of this house much harder or impossible just started to stack up in pretty improbable ways. So it started in a way that I wouldn't even really notice, which was my wife was going to take my daughter back up to LA to start packing up some of our stuff, and they were going to, and so that my daughter could visit with a friend, and they left me down in San Diego, and I was traveling later that week, and the plan was for them to just go up for a couple of days. And they ended up and take me to the airport. Well, they ended up staying for over a week for various good reasons. But I took an Uber to the airport. I was gone for a while. I came back. Then they were still up there. And this had never been the plan. It wasn't a problem. It wasn't anything, except that the plan had always been to just go up for a couple of days. And they ended up going up for a couple of weeks. And then when I went up to visit, like I had I'd probably gone into the house once, and then I went out and I was pruning a fruit tree, and I threw my back out so bad, it was like a whole other ball of wax. I have cerebral palsy, I have chronic back pain, but this was like I was laying on my back in the house, like basically screaming for 3 days straight whenever my back would spasm.
Yeah.
And then so that was the very first thing that happened. And I felt like I started to think, well, they were happy that the girls were apart from me and they wanted to tell me not to come back. And then the next thing was later, we all went back to San Diego, and then I went up to LA for work. And again, I get back to the house, and again, this time just myself. But again, my back goes out horrifically. I went up there for business meetings, and I couldn't even attend them because I was just completely crippled. So that's when so then we go back down to San Diego. My wife goes up again. Now we've set up all these things that we need to do to move out. One of them in particular, a very close friend of mine who is like the most reliable friend I've got in many ways. I mean, he's ex-Marine reliable, basically. And he has agreed to sort of oversee a lot of the handyman kind of work that we're going to need to strip up our house to sell it. Well, he comes a couple times, and then this is a guy that I could call at midnight. He picks up, and then he just disappears off the grid entirely. Doesn't answer phone calls, doesn't answer emails. He's just completely gone. And he was supposed to be in charge of all of this prep stuff for our house. And he just falls off the map. He's gone. So our moving completely stalls out. And then my wife starts trying to hire other people to move, but everybody she hires has some sort of unexpected reason why they're not that helpful. Like she hires a woman to clean who turns out to be from Iran and have been a very wealthy, highly educated doctor in Iran who just needed work and so was trying to get a job cleaning homes, but literally had no idea how to do it. Like she was cleaning the counters with toilet paper because she had servants in Iran and so had never had to clean a house.
Sure, makes sense.
But so you can see where all of this is circumstantial, but it was like each concrete step we tried to take to move out. There was just this sort of improv. My most reliable friend completely falls off the map and disappears for a month after he started to help us. People we hire don't even know how to do the basic skills that they have.
That's wild.
Contracted to do. Mm-hmm. Every time I go visit, my back goes out, and so then we're reaching
the worst form of.
I know I'm going on and on.
It's like the worst form of ghost sickness.
Yeah,
everybody had it.
So my wife goes up to finish some packing, and I'm down in San Diego watching my daughter because she's enrolled in school down here at this point. And my wife calls me after midnight, and she goes, "Oh my God, I just locked myself out of the house, and I didn't just lock myself out of the house. I locked myself out of the yard too. And it's after midnight, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And our neighbor, he's not picking up his phone, and I don't want to wake him up." And she's like, I'm like, "Oh my God, honey, like what? You're stranded. You're stranded in a neighborhood that's not at all safe after midnight." And I try to call the friend that had disappeared, right? Who like I said, I could always call him at midnight. He'd pick up. I don't get him.
Wow.
And so what she ends up doing, and my wife has fibromyalgia, but she ends up walking like 8 blocks through super sketchball neighborhood to get to the fire department. Thank God she was fine. But she knocks on the fire department, firefighters come, they unlock the house, they let her in. And then she calls and tells me this. The next day we're talking about this story, right? And I say to her, "Honey, you know how we've always felt like there are spirits in this house that really like us. And I don't think they want us to leave, and especially they don't want you and Daisy to leave. And I think they kind of blame me because it's my family that made it possible." And she's like, "You know what?" I said, "Because think about everything that's gone wrong on all of the basic steps of getting ready to go that we have tried to do. And all of it is just totally improbable." And she goes, "You know what? You might be right." And here's where we're lucky that we have friends across all walks of life, because my wife's best friend is actually a gypsy matriarch. And the gypsy community is very insular. They essentially live amongst themselves. They have their own means of judging and law enforcement, almost, you could say, amongst their own community. It's a very insular community that people who aren't gypsy tend to not get access to. And I should say, as a means of explanation, that I know that in some parts of the world, gypsy is considered a slur. Not among the Los Angeles gypsies or our friends that are gypsies. They call themselves gypsies. They refer to their language as gypsy. So please know that there is nothing derogatory in my use of gypsy, and my friends would tell you the same. But she is a gypsy matriarch. She's a fortune teller. I would describe her as a little bit flippantly as a good witch, right? And one of the things that she also deals with is exorcising spirits. And so she happens to be my wife's best friend, which is why it's wonderful we get to experience the behind the curtain of the gypsy culture. Like, I got to go to her grandson's wedding, and oh my gosh, it was so amazing, you guys. Like, I was this guest of honor. They sat me at the table with like the heads of all the families, and I felt like I was in The Godfather. Like, everybody's wearing 3-piece suits, fedoras, ties, jewelry. We're all being served like giant steaks. you know, and then you go at a certain point in the ceremony. This is after the ceremony. This is the reception, but it's a giant dance party. But then at a certain point, you go into another room with the bride and the groom and the sort of patriarchs of all the families, and they've got these 2 roast suckling pigs, and they're serving you suckling pig, and then they pass around essentially a hat, and everybody puts in money for the young couple to get their lives started. And I'm telling you, they probably raised like 40 grand. They probably raised like 40 grand in 15 minutes. I mean, it's like it's really another world. It's amazing. I mean, cash. So anyway, we go to my wife's best friend and we say, you know, we think that here's our theory on what's going on. It feels like there's something supernatural that's blocking our leaving. And we felt like emotionally that was based in that the spirits experienced the trauma along with the house. And they feared that if we left, whoever bought the house next would hurt them all over again. And so she comes, and we told her that we believe it's 3. We believe it's 3 spirits. Mm-hmm. So she comes over to the house, and she's got like this big candle. It's like her ghost candle, for lack of a better, I don't know what the better name for it would be. Big, tall, thick, white candle. And house is locked up. There's no breezes. There's no drafts. There's nothing. And she lights the ghost candle, and she calls to the ghosts. And as soon as she speaks to them, and she says, "Look, don't worry. They're going to find a nice family to move in after them. You're going to be okay." And she just sort of reassures them that we care for them and respect them, and we're not abandoning them to be tortured all over again. And when she finishes, she calls them again. And this whole time, this flame has been totally steady, and there's no, again, like I said, no draft, no air in the house. And all of a sudden, as she speaks to each of them, the candle flame flickers clearly, like almost blinks out 1, 2, 3 times. It goes blink, 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 and then extinguishes. And you know, I saw this. My wife saw this. This happened in front of us, and she goes, "You were right. There are 3 of them. It's 2 older people and a young and a child." And that was them agreeing. That was them understanding and agreeing and promising not to to try to stop you guys from moving anymore.
That's wild.
After that happened, everything just started rolling along smooth as pie. I stopped being racked with pain every time I went back to the house. Everything just kind of happened relatively easily, still a lot of work, but relatively easily. And then we ended up setting like a neighborhood record on the price that we got for the house when we sold it.
Bonus.
So it was very clear the difference between what it was like before and after ourselves and my wife's best friend, the Gypsy matriarch, had spoken to the spirits. And that's why the story is called The Roma and the Haunted Move.
I'm a believer.
That is a great story.
That's a great setup.
I mean, no kidding. Yeah,
I believe after that for sure.
That's a lot to try to figure out. What like you said, I mean, you got the back injuries and just everything.
The statistical probabilities.
The friend that you said you could contact, and he would answer at midnight. You didn't hear from him for a long time, and it just that's something's there.
I'm talking. This was a guy that I've known for years, and who I could call anytime I needed anything. That kind of friend, and he just completely disappeared. Yeah. And like I said, any one of these things was circumstantial.
Sure.
But they just started stacking up in a way where we felt like, okay, there's something going on here that we need to try to address in a less, sort of rational, straightforward manner, because nothing is happening in a rational, straightforward manner here.
Right. That is though, Zevin. That's a great. Wild. Yeah. And I'm glad it all worked out for you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Because I know you and I messaged, around that time, because you hadn't had a chance to record, you were like, man, I just haven't had time because just so much was going on with the house thing. And, and you were like, I can't wait to get back to to be able to put some episodes out. So it's crazy. And I'm glad, even like I said, the price wise, like that's even more awesome, more of a bonus.
It really felt like that the will of the spirits had switched from an obstructive curse to a blessing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
cool?
that was how much everything changed.
Right.
And like I said, I believe in science. I'm a rational guy, all this stuff, but you can't explain to me, like, okay, if it was a trick birthday cake candle, okay, I get that, right? But the three distinct flickers where it would go down to almost being out and then pop back up happened well after we had all been speaking to the spirits for a while.
Right.
So, I mean, and it wasn't just our friend doing the talking. So you could go, well, she planned her speech to exactly this amount of time because after this amount of time, she knew that the candles would flicker. No, there's just no way, because it was a much more free-flowing experience than that. And then the fact that right after 3 flickers, the flame became full again and then extinguished itself. I don't know what to tell you.
Some kind of a psychic energy that
And
you know
what?
crazy.
And you know what? Like we always say on our show, that's what you experienced. I mean, so no one can, we weren't there. So for me to go, Zevin, that doesn't. Who am I to say my opinion because I didn't, like I'm taking your word for it. It's like. That's what we do on this show. Like, I don't know what it is, but there was something,
that is,
and if you believe it,
explain that,
I mean, I'm sold. I'm on your side, but I'm just saying people that don't believe that stuff, it's like, well, then prove it didn't happen. Or
it's a great example.
Then what is your proof of?
It's a great example of
Right.
non-paranormal.
saying,
it's just
explain this to me then.
right.
Right. It's the whole. There are more things in heaven and earth to ratio than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
Yeah,
back to that.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
Maybe
I love the
it's not
Shakespeare.
ghosts. Maybe it's like Star Wars midichlorians. Like who? I don't know. I don't claim to know what it is.
Sure. Yeah.
Except that our feeling was that it was ghosts, and this is how it all went down.
Right.
And by the way, I'm like the first guy. I'm generally King Skeptic type of guy. I mean, I'm the one who goes to the magic show, and I'm not going to be a jerk and start yelling, "This is how you did it."
right, yeah.
You're a fraud. Yeah.
I will admit that I spend a lot of my time just at a magic show. Instead of enjoying it, I'm like grinding my gears trying to figure it out.
Right.
To debunk it, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
Look, I'm not somebody to just blindly be like, "Oh, well, that was obviously magic," or obviously spirits. I don't. That's not my default position by any means. But I mean, that's the best I got for this one.
I'm glad you shared that story.
Awesome, yeah.
And Zevin, I'm not going to let you get off this phone without you. You've got another great story that I want you to tell. Not true crime and non paranormal, but you've got it. You know what I'm talking about. The story that I want you to share with.
Yeah, sure.
It's in my notes, and so I just don't want to let you go without. Not that
of course.
I mean, we got a few more minutes,
No,
but
of course, please. Yeah, I'm more than happy to share it.
But yeah, I'm glad I just want our listeners and Nate and Sean to hear this.
When I was a senior in high school, I was accepted. I'm sure you guys have Rotary clubs in Indiana, right?
Yep.
Oh yes.
And they got Rotary clubs everywhere. So Rotary clubs, they host student exchanges. And what they do is they hook up with a Rotary. Rotary is divided into districts. Ask me, I'm the Rotary expert here because you have to be an exchange student. So they hook up your district will find a district in another country, and they send students there, and that district sends students to you. And so I applied to be an exchange student when I was a senior in high school, and I thought I wanted to go to Italy. And they interviewed me, and when the interview was over, I got a call, and I don't know if it's because I'm the hippie that grew up in the middle of the woods off the power grid or that I believe in spiritual stuff or what, but they said to me, Zevin, we know you want to go to Italy. We've chosen you to be one of our exchange students, and we're just going to tell you up front, if you want to go to Italy, we'll send you to Italy. So this is not, we're not doing a bait and switch with you, but we've never done an exchange with India. Our district never has. And we think you would be the perfect candidate to do that. Would you be willing to go to India? And at first, I was probably more ignorant than I should have been, but I think of India and all I think of is like Mother Teresa and the slums of Calcutta versus like imagining waltzing around the Roman Colosseum and stuffing my face with delicious spaghetti, because I'm Italian. My last name is Swedish, but my father's mother was a Brocchini. And so I was thrilled to go to Italy, one of my ancestral lands. And I'm picturing just the teeming masses of what I've seen on like a National Geographic documentary. And I'm like, whoa, Italy, India, they both start with an I, But then I said, well, let me think about it. And I hung up the phone. And as soon as I hung up the phone, it became like a Back to the Future, what are you, Chicken McFly sort of moment, where as excited as I had been about Italy, once someone proposed India, everything in my imagination kind of paled in comparison, because I was like, well, if you go to Italy, it'll be a different culture, a different language. You'll have an amazing time, but it's still, first world Western culture. It's going to be pretty similar in a lot of ways. But if you go to India, it's going to be like going to another planet. It's going to blow your mind. And granted, thinking that India was another planet was probably ignorant of me too. There's a lot about India that's not so different after all, and a lot that is. But I felt like I had been double dog dared, and that anything other than the subcontinent suddenly seemed boring. So I called them up and I said, yes, send me to India. And I had an incredible time in India. I want to say at the outset that it's sort of human nature that negative experiences or emotionally charged experiences tend to stick in our memories harder than the positive ones. I think they've proven that. And so when I tell some of these stories about India, I don't want anyone to think that that's all that's there, or that I have any bad feelings about India. I love my time there. I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's a beautiful country. They're the kindest people. But there are definitely things where when you're an American and you're used to a very sort of well-ordered, highly controlled, like I want my microwave dinner in 3 minutes and my pizza in a half an hour or it's free, when that's the mindset which a lot of us operate in.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
India can be pretty gobsmacking. So I go over there and I'm going to live with 4 different families for 3 months apiece and attend a second senior year in high school. It's basically a gap year between high school and college. And the main point, even though I've already graduated, the main point for me is to go have this cultural experience. And the idea behind the program is you live with the families and you're a member of the family. And I did my best to be that way, to follow traditions. And I even would wear traditional clothing. And it was an amazing experience. However, this story I'm about to tell underlines some of the cultural differences, and most cultures, whether we want to talk about it much or not, are pretty much rooted in the laws or precepts of a given religion, right? I mean, most of the I'm not going to say most, but a lot of the key laws in America or any Western country a lot of them boil down to the 10 Commandments, right? If not laws, then social things that are socially acceptable or not, like thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery. There's things that basically have been codified into our society. Yep. Well, in India, of course, they have all those same laws, so don't think that's where I'm going. I'm like, yeah, in India, everybody cheats on their wives and murders their neighbors. No, quite the opposite. They tend to be much more moral in their behavior than your average American, if I do say so. But one of the tenets of Hinduism, and actually to some extent Buddhism too, but I'm speaking about Hinduism here because the families I lived with were Hindus, is the belief in reincarnation. And what's interesting, I think there's a couple misconceptions in the West about Hinduism and polytheism and also reincarnation. I'm getting a little off track here, but I'm going to hit this real quick. So with reincarnation, somebody might think, well, if someone knows they're going to be reincarnated, then they're not going to value their life as much as they should because they know they're going to get another shot at it. Well, actually, no, because if for Christians, I would categorize myself as a Christian, we believe we're going to die and basically be ourselves in heaven eternally or in hell eternally, wherever you deserve to go. And in Hinduism, sure, they believe in reincarnation, but they also believe that it's incredibly difficult to darn near impossible to be incarnated as a human. So when you die as a human, if you don't break free of the karmic cycle, you're probably coming back as like an insect or a chicken or something that underscores some lesson that you failed to learn. Like if you're completely obsessed with sex, you might come back as a rooster. But it could be literally tens of thousands of years before you achieve a human incarnation again, so don't waste it. But out of this belief in incarnation comes a very strong responsibility to be a good steward over and to not be violent toward animals, because they may very well once have been human, and God forbid they were someone that you loved.
Right.
And so there's really only under the most extreme circumstances would a Hindu ever kill an animal. And even then they might not. They might actually, depending on how enlightened they were, they might choose to let the animal kill them. I don't think most of the people I knew would have, but the point is, you don't just kill an animal because it's a nuisance to you.
Right.
You just don't. And a funny example before I get to the main story, one day there was a cobra in the house, like a king cobra. I didn't see it, but it was in the house somewhere. And, my reaction, if there's like a deadly venomous snake in the house somewhere, if I see it, I'm going to try to kill it.
Right.
Yeah,
That's fair.
Yeah. Hindus believe that cobras guard wealth, almost like a dragon in epic fantasy. And so if you were to kill a cobra, well, not only would its mate be super pissed and come looking for you, which is actually a thing, so that's a good reason not to do it too.
Yeah.
But also, you would be materially harming your ability to generate and protect your wealth. You're essentially killing the guardian of your wealth. So they're not going to kill it. So they brought in a snake charmer, not as much the guys that are doing the performance getting the snake out of the basket, but a guy whose job it was to catch the snake and get it into the basket. Sure. Which they did, and then they just essentially released it and were like, be on your way, King Cobra that was just hiding under the bed and could have killed anyone in the house.
Right.
So for me, that's like, I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
I totally respect different cultures, but that was like,
that's a little extreme to me.
My mind.
Yeah, you're right.
So now I've finally made it to the next story. Oh, last thing I wanted to say, sorry about the polytheism thing.
No, you're good.
Actually, that's a Western misconception too, because they actually believe in one soul, like one God functionally, which is Shiv, but then they believe that God is the totality of God is too immense for human beings to conceive of, and if we try to engage with it directly, it will basically break our minds, or at the very least not be able to focus our prayers. So all of the other gods that they have are essentially faces of the one God who you pray to in order to focus the intention of your prayer.
Interesting. Interesting.
Okay.
For someone who was raised in a Catholic tradition, is almost identical to how saints work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like basically identical to how saints work. And I know that early Christian missionaries, one of the first places they went was India. And I can't help but wonder if they didn't borrow or at least learn from some of those traditions. So anyway, to this private Catholic boys' high school in India, and every morning I would ride my bike there. And, by the way, the uniform is wool jacket, button-up Oxford shirt, tie, slacks, shoes. You're lucky. They used to have these march paths in our houses, almost like Harry Potter. And if it was 100 degrees and 100% humidity, kids would just be dropping like flies. But so every morning I get up, I put on my wool jacket and all this stuff, and I get ready to bike to school. And I walk out of the house and I get on my bike and I off into the streets. The streets are incredible. Elephants, trucks, rickshaws, everything you can imagine. But this one morning I walk out there, and in India, there are packs of feral dogs that just sort of roam the streets, and they're pretty horrifying. They look more or less like the hyenas from The Lion King, except they're just covered in mange.
Yeah.
If anybody doesn't know what mange is, it's when like giant clumps of a dog's hair fall out, and then there are sores underneath. And these are literally wild dogs that roam the streets in packs. And one of them in particular had selected my host family's quite large front yard to be his, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, love palace. His plan was to shack up with his cadre of, sexy mangy street. I don't want to say bitches, but that's what they literally are. Right?
Yeah.
And so I walk, and I'm not aware of any of this yet. I walk out of the house, It's, by the way, I had to be at school by 7:15. It was about a 40-minute bike ride, so it's early in the morning. I'm a little tired. I'm walking over to my bike, and all of a sudden, just this vicious, big male, looks like a zombie, between the mange and the sores, but the size and the teeth, it looks like a zombie German Shepherd. Like, if you've seen Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead and they made the tiger into a zombie, if they made a German Shepherd into a zombie, that's this dog, except it's alive, right? And it just makes a beeline at me, and snot and saliva and everything just flying, like the scariest bark you've ever heard. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to die. So I run back. I run back into the house and slam the doors shut. Like, this guy's just about got a hold of my friggin' sphincter with his teeth. That's what it felt like. It's like when you tie off a balloon. Like, man, I was afraid he was going to untie my balloon. So I run back in the house and I'm like, Dad, to my host father. I'm like, there's this insane street dog out there, and when I try to go out and get on my bike, it's going to give me rabies. It's going to give me, it's going to give me Ebola. It's going to eat me. It's going to eat my face and feed it to its harem. Like, nothing is going to be okay here, And I'm imagining that he's going to call like animal control or the dog catcher or like the National Guard or the Rock from Rampage with some kind of giant tranquilizer dart machine gun. I mean, I'm imagining some kind of like shock and awe overwhelming force is going to be employed to make sure like this dog doesn't have a chance to murder or at the very least give rabies to the little weenie American teenager.
At least the guy that got the cobra out of the house, you think they would call at least him, and he could come and get the dog.
Yeah,
the dog
maybe
whisperer.
Just have him chuck the cobra at the dog and hope for the best.
There you go.
To distract each other.
Right.
It's like it's like Kong versus Godzilla.
Yeah, exactly.
There you
go. So my assumptions were wildly wrong. Here's what he does do. I mean, frankly, and I hate to say this, and I probably shouldn't, but when you're dealing with a wild, possibly rabid, super mangy street dog that's going to attack your children, if I lived in the country, I would. There's a chance I would shoot that dog, like rather than take the chance that it's going to attack my daughter or something.
Sure,
I mean,
absolutely.
So in my mind, all options are on the table, and God forbid you'd have to kill a dog. We all love our dogs and never would want something like that to happen. But again, this is not a dog
You're right.
in the sense that any American thinks of a dog. I'd never seen a dog like this at all. It's more like a zombie hyena wolf.
Cujo.
Cujo, yeah.
Right. Cujo with pustulant sores and stuff, though. It's just like, it's really horrific. And so I'm like, okay, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? Does he have a gun? Does he have a dart gun? Does he have, what's he going to do? And here's what he does. He goes to the backyard. He's got a 2x4. It's a long 2x4, like probably for framing a house or something. 2x4 is probably 25, 30 feet long. And out in front of the house are stone steps and then like a flagstone courtyard area before the grass and the larger yard where the dog's been hanging out are. So my host father walks out, and I guess, I'm joking, but maybe this is ingenious, sort of. He walks out with this big, long, 30-foot long 2x4, and immediately, as soon as he walks out of the house, this dog, makes a beeline for him. It's gonna, rip his nuts off and eat them for hors d'oeuvres, just like it was gonna rip mine off. It's coming right at him. They're getting spit flying, the scariest growls and barking you've ever heard. Yeah, zombie Cujo coming right at your nuts, right? And so my host father starts picking up this 2x4 and just smacking it down on the flagstones, like whap, whap, like back and forth, left, right, so that he's functionally like laying down suppressive fire, but with a 2x4, and the zombie dog can't get inside the radius of this 2x4 because it keeps going up and coming back down and moving, and so the dog's afraid of getting crushed by the 2x4. So basically, he keeps the dog at bay with the 2x4 while I run to my bike. But my bike is kept outside of the radius of the 2x4. So the moment I get on my bike, I start pedaling for dear life. Well, the dog's no longer trying to get my host father. He's become irrelevant, as has his protection. Instead, the dog makes a direct beeline for me, and I'm pedaling with every ounce of my desire to live. Keep in mind, I have cerebral palsy, which means one of my legs only really works about half as well as the other, and my balance is fucked. Pardon my French.
You're
my
all right.
balance is bad.
You're all right.
So I mean, it's a bit of, and I'm basically riding on some combination of sand and grass. It's a bit of a miracle I never fell down. But I think my desire to live is what it comes down to. I'm pedaling as hard as I can, and this dog is like literally nipping at my heels until I, on my bike, cross, I guess, his piss perimeter, and whatever he did to announce that another creature was entering his love palace.
Yeah.
Once I make it across his markings, he peels off because I am no longer threatening the sovereignty of his castle. So I'm like, phew, that was close, and I go to school, and of course I'm thinking to myself, well, probably today while I'm at school, my host father will call the dog catcher or, the National Guard or whatever, and come up with some kind of more permanent solution to this. And that'll be that. Boy, that was scary, but hey, great story. I survived. I go home that night, and the next morning I get up to go to school, and when I walk out the front door, here's zombie Cujo again. Straight beeline for me. He's gonna bite my nuts off all over again. And I run back inside. Dad, the dog's back. What does he do? 2x4. Rinse, repeat.
Oh.
So and this went on for about 2 straight weeks.
Gosh.
Until ultimately that dog, essentially unmolested, must have finished doing what he was doing in the yard and moved somewhere else. Maybe he conquered a different love palace. But every school day for about 2 weeks, it was here comes the whapping 2x4, here comes the insane zombie dog, Devin sprinting like sweat pouring because it's 100% humidity. It's 100 degrees, and I'm wearing a wool blazer and a tie. And by the way, like slippery black leather, patent leather dress shoes.
Oh man!
Sprint to the rickety bicycle, hop on it, trying to get traction on basically sand, and pedal for dear life to get over the piss perimeter before Zombie Dog eats me.
All with your CP.
Yeah, all with my cerebral palsy. Like, I mean, this was like a horror movie. It was a Cujo horror movie version of Groundhog Day
with some humor thrown
every day for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's
But hey,
classic.
I'm fine.
Whoa, Zevin, that is the third time I've heard that story, and I still think it's the best story I've heard in a long time.
That's funny.
I'm like, you got to tell it. You got to tell it. Oh my gosh. I mean, I like we were talking yesterday or the day before. I mean, how scary that would be if you were in the midst of it. But looking back at it, you got to just like, wow, yeah. Wow.
Throughout that entire story, Todd's over there just giggling.
Oh my gosh, because I know what's coming next, and I'm just like, oh my gosh,
funny.
yeah, just the 2x4.
Yeah,
You're like, what? Just wagging it back and forth.
Yeah.
I can picture that whole story in my mind's eye.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Oh gosh, thank you for sharing. And
like
and it's not just like it's one day. 2
2x4
weeks.
thing was pretty smart. Like that's I've stored that away as a possibly useful strategy.
Yeah,
I hope that I will hopefully never have to employ. But no, funny. Todd, you're absolutely right. It was both terrifying and pretty funny.
I mean,
just. They say that the root of comedy is tragedy, right?
Right, like, exactly.
Little, or not little, I was tall, but like handicapped boy sprinting to hop on the bicycle and get out of the yard over the piss perimeter before rabid dog can murder him while host father whaps 2x4 on ground is like... It's hilarious. It's farcical. But it was also just absolutely horrifying.
I mean, I'm picturing, if that was in a movie, Zevin, that'd be like Will Ferrell or Michael Myers or Mike Myers or like Charles Sear. Like, somebody like, or Ben Stiller. That'd be a Ben Stiller situation where he's always in those situations. It's just like, oh my gosh, how did he get into that?
Right.
Those certain comedians.
And then the wife would come out and be like, this is your solution? Like, smack some wood on the ground while our guest runs for his life.
Oh, man.
Definitely in the Ben Stiller movie or in the Will Ferrell movie, there would be an angry wife berating him for being an idiot.
Yeah, for sure.
But,
oh man, thank you so much. You got to share that. Oh my gosh,
I'm not sure which story I like better. Those are both good.
Oh, I know. Yeah, It's like totally different contrast. Yeah. Right. So, oh my gosh. Well, Zevin, we do.
You could
go ahead.
You can pick one and save one for some really if you want. Whatever you want to do. I mean, obviously, I don't need to tell you what to do. You guys do what you want. But
oh yeah, those are great.
Yeah,
You're a great storyteller, by the way. That's right. Oh my gosh,
great setup.
Thank you.
That's why I haven't said a whole lot. I'm just
Todd, kind of you to ask me to tell a story that I've told a few times.
Oh man,
that helps.
No, I'm not kidding.
Comedians say they never do new material on the Tonight Show.
That's like I said. That's the third time I've heard it, and I'm laughing just as hard. So that's oh my gosh.
I haven't said a whole lot this guest chat just because I've been entertained by all the stories.
Oh yeah, that's why listeners, you have to listen to Zevin on Kind of Murdery.
Oh my gosh, yes,
he does a great job telling all the stories, and you'll hear some of those type of stories too. So the personal experiences that's.
I'm never gonna think of you the same way again, though. I have to say, when I listen, I'm like, oh, I remember this.
And my my 14-year-old daughter and 11-year-old son, they're getting to the age where we're letting them watch more and more. I'm trying to think, intense, I guess, horror movies. Or ones that they're not little kids anymore, and so some were still like, okay, not yet, but so I told them about Cujo, and they're like, oh, what's that about? So now when I have my daughter and son, we watch Cujo, I'm gonna think of Zevin Odelberg. Like, you know, just that whole, oh my gosh, yeah, that's some crazy.
Guys, I have a friend who was chased by this dog every day for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And he had to like ride a bicycle like a clown on a unicycle to try to escape. You know?
In sand. Yeah. Oh my gosh. What what a joy that story is. So thank you. Zevin,
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Dude,
Oh
we
my gosh,
cannot
no
thank you
problem, man,
enough.
no problem.
We do not want to let you go until you tell our listeners how they can get a hold of you, how they can follow you. Again, tell when your episodes drop and all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. So I host a show called Kinda Murdery. It's a historical true crime show with a dash of the paranormal, and you can find it Kinda Murdery. That's KINDA, murder with a Y, no dashes. Kinda Murdery, wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube too, at Kinda Murdery on all social media. You can Google me, Zevin Odelberg, and that's the main result you get is Kinda Murdery. So you can find us all those places. Please do subscribe. Please listen, and especially please tell your friends and leave reviews. That type of word of mouth, and I'm parroting Todd here because he's really good at getting this message out there. But
Absolutely.
telling your friends and leaving reviews so that other people can hear it from somebody other than the podcaster, that the podcast is worth their time.
Absolutely.
That's a huge thing. So please do subscribe to Kinda Murdery, follow us on social media at Kinda Murdery, and reach out to me, kindamurdery@gmail.com. If you have questions, if you have complaints, if you have ideas for future stories, I would really appreciate the engagement. I am responsive. Like, don't hesitate. Just come be part of the merry murdery pranksters along with me, and hopefully hear some good stories along the way. And of course, as we talked about, it's not all merry murdery. Lots of it's very serious, but I think, as you can tell from just me having the wonderful opportunity to chat with the guys from Middle Aged and Creeped Out here, it feels like a family. We're a group of friends, and that's how I feel about the Kinda Murdery listeners too. So please come join us, and let's all enjoy the stories together.
Yes,
That's
sir.
awesome.
That's
That
a
is
perfect way
awesome.
to say it. Yeah,
It is.
Yeah, and you know what, Zevin, you are a friend. Not just of the show, but you're a friend to us, and we just appreciate the person you are.
Yeah.
You are a fantastic podcaster. You've got a great show. But I'm speaking for all of us, but personally, you've been great. You're responsive. Your interaction is wonderful, and I just appreciate the person you are. And thank you for your contributions to this world and your thoughts and your opinion, like the way you approach life. We appreciate it. I appreciate it. So thank you, sir.
I say authentic and one of a kind for sure.
Absolutely. No,
Exclamation mark.
I'm serious.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
You're a great,
Truly.
You're a great person. I'm glad to have.
You guys, I'm
to know
gonna get all teary-eyed now.
Yeah. Well,
I told you I'm a soft touch.
We're on each
Thank you.
other's
That's so kind
Christmas
of you to
list,
say. Well,
right?
I love you guys too.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
absolutely.
Christmas cards. Yep, they're coming
Yeah.
both ways.
Well, now Zevin's kind of teary now, right? See, it's kind of
Kind of teary.
no.
Middle-aged and teared out.
Yeah, middle-aged and teared out. Right. Well, Zevin, I hope you had a good time on here. We love talking to you.
Me, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you
Me too. Likewise. And by the way, I would love to have you guys come on the show too. So let's figure that out soon.
Awesome. We appreciate that. We will accept. We'll just say right now.
That'd be a blast.
Yeah, that would. So, well, sir, have a great rest of the evening. Have a great rest of the week. Tell your wife and daughter we said hi, and much success to you, man. I can't wait for your next episode. I love your show, and I know Nate and Sean do as well. So keep up the great work, and we just want our friends to be just more successful, So we all root for each other, and that's what it's all about. So
rising tide floats all boats. Absolutely.
You got it. That's awesome.
So
you read my mind.
Yep.
When does this drop, guys? Does this drop tonight?
Ooh, tonight. Yeah, tonight. Yep.
Yeah, man. After we're done, we've got to do our little pre-announcements and post-announcements and all that. And then once we have it, Sean will do what he does. And then, so.
Slice and dice and serve.
Awesome.
Yep. Yeah. So.
Awesome. Let's see. I will. Yeah. So I mean, do send it to me, Todd, because I will drop it.
Awesome.
It, and I'll also start when I do drop it. I'll start running your guys' promo in my. I can drop it and do an ad bucket, and it will actually run throughout the whole catalog and not just a single episode. So, I'll definitely do that too.
Nice.
Great.
Well, thank
Cool,
you,
man.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll and we'll, of course, we'll promote your show when we can. You know, like you do. You have a wonderful podcast. So it's I follow almost 50 podcasts, and they're all great, and yours is certainly one of them, sir. So.
Oh, thank you. Did I send you? I sent you my promo, right?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
It's a great one, too.
It's been such a blast, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you
man.
Yeah, thank you, Zevin. Yeah, man.
Thanks,
Zevin.
Zevin.
Chance to tell some stories. And
yeah.
I'm sorry if I talk too much. I probably should have let you guys tell some stories, too.
Brother, you are the guest on the guest chat. That's why we have you
You're
on.
the spotlight.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're a great storyteller, and like I said, a great person, and that's what we want. You definitely
You brought it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
You brought it.
awesome.
So we appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right, man. Have a great night, you guys. I'm sure we'll talk like tomorrow. And thanks again for having me on. It was such a blast. And let's Todd reach out to me. We'll figure out when we can have you guys come on Kind of Murdery too, because I think that'd be really fun.
That'd be awesome.
Sounds great,
I'm looking
man.
forward to that.
Yeah, we
Awesome.
appreciate that. Thank you so much, man.
Zevin, thanks, man. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Bye, guys.
All right, bye.
right,
See
bye.
ya. Creepies, what do you think? That was a great guest chat with Mr. Zevin Odelberg.
That was fun. Just as much fun as I knew it was going to be.
Wasn't it, though?
I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, he did not disappoint, because I know he after my intro, he was like, man, he set me up for a little disappointment. You know, hoping he didn't disappoint, and I knew
Oh,
he
my
wouldn't.
gosh, no.
He didn't.
Zevin was awesome. He paid us really well to say this too, by the way.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It
Zevin,
cleared
I
on my
had to-
Venmo
It
already.
did, good.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
so we could. So he's fantastic. No, he really is though. And
No, he is. He is
He's just
great.
a down to earth guy. Like I said, when I said authentic, it was like,
Yep.
yeah, he's truly like, you know. And so when it was coming out of his mouth, is like, you know, it's how he feels and what he thinks.
Yeah.
And then when
He's,
he's a great storyteller.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, he is a great guy. And he did not disappoint, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I didn't converse too much. I was
I know,
listening to
I
an
know.
audiobook.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I told him, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, I said, okay, I'm going to tell you right now, you've got to tell your rabid dog story when you're in India, because it just still cracks me up.
That's
like
funny.
I'm picturing this horrific thing that he had to deal with, but yet it's the funniest thing I've ever heard.
Well, you know,
I'm
he
like,
just- he-
he goes, okay. He goes, oh, just remind me.
He goes into some cerebral like file and it's like, okay, and then he just like okay, kiddies, let's tell the story, and it was just great.
Yeah.
And I said from now on,
like
when
it
I
just
listen-
happened. Like
when I
he-
listen, exactly when I
and it
listen.
was
So the pictures are very
20 some years ago or whatever.
vivid in my head, thinking about like, well, oh my gosh, which makes it even funnier. But to me, I'll never listen to him the same, which is great. I love that.
Like I said, that's the third time I've heard it, and it's just as funny.
It's funny, yeah. It's good.
And again, you can literally picture him running to his bike, hopping on, and trying
Oh my
to
gosh,
pedal for dear life. And
absolutely.
his host dad's whacking the 2x4, and that dog is poor dog.
It is.
I mean,
It's now a strategy I have to keep
Yeah.
up there. Like he said, like just in case, like last ditch effort to get some.
I'm going to use it for my wife and kids
It's
when
a
I don't want to. No, get back.
Dad, oh. Okay, we'll just leave him alone.
No, so yeah,
going-
that was fun.
he's going crazy.
Zevin was awesome. So
Yeah, thank you,
we'll have
Zevin,
him on
for the
again.
time. That was fun.
He keeps the train rolling. Every guest chat we've had has been awesome, and this
Train
it's the
keeps it
same.
rolling all night
Yeah.
long, right?
So anyway, so now, Sean, what you got?
I
for-
got to give, I've gone back and forth trying to decide whether I wanted to do a dark side or a middle-aged moment, and I've been enjoying the dark sides, I have to admit. So I felt like Zevin. After talking, I made my decision because I had a couple different ideas, but I'm going Shine Down, Monsters. I love the song. Actually, my boys even love the song. When it comes on, they know this. They know the words. So I'm going to go over this. This just felt appropriate, Zevin. I hope you enjoy this. It goes, good for you. You fooled everybody. Good for you. You fooled everyone. Good for you. Now you're somebody. Good for you. You fooled everyone. Leave your weapon on the table, wrapped in burlap, barely able. Don't get angry. Don't discourage. Take a shot of liquid courage. 'Cause my monsters are real. They're trained how to kill, and there's no coming back, and they just laughed at how I feel. And these monsters can fight, and they'll never say die, and there's no going back. If I get trapped, I'll never heal. Yeah, my monsters are real. So good for you. You hurt everybody. Good for you. You hurt everyone. Good for you. You love nobody. Good for you. You owe no one. Leave your weapon on the table, wrapped in burlap, barely able. Call a doctor. Say a prayer. Choose a God you think is there. Because my monsters are real. It's hard not to sing this. They're trained how to kill, and there's no coming back, and they just laughed at how I feel. These monsters can fight, they'll never say die, and there's no going back. If I get trapped, I'll never heal, because my monsters are real. So it goes on. It said, leave your weapon on the table, wrapped in burlap, barely able. Don't get angry, don't discourage. Take a shot of liquid courage. Leave a light on if you're able, because we both know you're unstable. Call a doctor, say a prayer, choose a God you think is there. And then it goes back through the chorus. So I love that. It's very, this reminds me of Zevin because it's so vivid, you know, and there's a darkness to it, but when you listen to it, if you haven't heard the song, do yourself a favor, go listen to it. I'm sure Zevin has, but it is fantastic. Shinedown's awesome anyway, but this gets you in the mood. And my 10-year-old, my 14-year-old, this comes on the radio and they're like, my monsters, you know? So there's this internal struggle between good and evil, right? And I think it's in each one of us.
And what's
this
real
song brings,
and what's
right.
You can use.
This song pulls that out of you. So, and I think Zevin, just talking with him in his podcast and his life stories and his view of things, this song made me think of him. So I chose this just for you. And like I said, and I felt like a dark side was appropriate because now dark side doesn't always mean that like we're trying to just scare you or be evil or anything like that. More, edgy. But there's a message in a dark underbelly of life. Yeah. And, he kept quoting Shakespeare, which I loved, and that was
and I've never heard of Shakespeare. Is he well known? Is he an actor? Did he write plays or something?
You don't know Willie?
Billy Shakespeare.
Billy Shakespeare, right?
So I have just by when you said that what you were going to read, I don't know. I can't picture it. Like you were telling me the words.
You gotta go listen to it. Yeah.
But I'm going to say, listening to you read that, it was vivid. The words are awesome. So I'm going to have to, now maybe when I play it, I'll be like, okay, yeah.
I know that one. Yeah.
It's off their newer Attention album.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That was
so
awesome.
It's been getting a lot of play.
Okay.
It's not hard to
So I will definitely be one of those to check it out.
Okay.
And see. But yeah,
Please
I appreciate that. It was awesome. And I know Zevin would like that too. So, coming out of that, Sean, you've got the second half of the announcements.
I do. Sure. And so, for the second parts, we always want you to be able to communicate with us. We have an email address. People still use those. That's makopodcast@gmail.com. That's 2 A's. We also have this thing, Thursdays?
Wait a minute,
Thursdays, right?
You said Mako. Right, okay. I thought you said something else.
Kind of murdery? Is that what I said? No.
Kind of murdery.
He's like, yes.
Middle-aged what?
What?
Sorry, I think I was, I don't know.
No, you might have had a seizure over there. Maybe a heart attack, stroke, something. I don't know. Something went.
Three.
Something went awry. Something went awry over there. So makopodcast@gmail.com. 2 A's. I think I said that anyway. If not, we'll edit all that out. I'm just kidding. I was gonna start to say
I'm not editing that.
Nate's like, you guys gotta. One of you take a break next week. I gotta go back to 2 of you.
Discuss this.
Just 2 of us. Tuesday Terror.
Yeah.
Please
talk
listen.
amongst yourselves.
Every Tuesday or Thursday-ish, whatever.
But we do Tuesday Terrors on Tuesdays.
You're right.
So far we've done.
We should just
Is
be
it
honest.
Tuesdays?
It's normally Tuesdays, right?
Yeah.
The same day as
That's why I don't ever
tacos,
see
right?
them.
Taco Tuesdays, Taco Terror, Tuesday Terrors. Wait a minute,
Nate's
what?
out on
I just got it all
Tuesdays.
mixed up. I think we're all having seizures here.
No wonder we haven't gotten any feedback from you.
Come listen to these Tuesday
I
Terrors.
keep looking for them on Thursday.
Because they're fun. They are fun.
No, not Saturday.
My daughter, Claire, actually paid me a compliment. She said,
Claire,
I liked on your video.
She
and
does.
I said, how did
she
you?
likes the...
Yeah, and she goes, I like the fact that it was clearer. I was like, you little son of a gun. And I said, well, I listened to your advice that it needs to be clear, crisp, and entertaining, or nobody's going to want to click on it. So she's helping. Claire Bear is helping.
Or
me.
the guy that said, what did he use, a 1997 flip phone?
She basically hurled the same insults at me too. So she has offered her services in TikTok anytime that we wish. So.
Okay.
So she's out there.
Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, thank you, Claire.
In other words, she's saying you're embarrassing her.
You suck, Dad. Stop sucking.
Step aside, Father.
Yes, exactly. Let a child do it. That knows what they're doing. We also are on all listening platforms. Obviously, your favorite one. Go find us and listen. Give us a 5-star rating and review if you like our show. If you don't, then just keep going. Yeah.
No hard feelings. Just, I mean, if it's not your gig, man, I get it.
That's all I got to say about that. And I haven't gotten to say this in a minute, although I did say it earlier, not too long ago. Go get you some merch.
Yeah,
please. Go get you some.
There was a sale today, 35%.
Yeah, right. There's always a sale.
I got me a new
Every time you turn around.
sweatshirt. Finally got my hoodie because I've got 3 shirts and some other stuff. I got my hoodie.
Our logo on
comfy.
whatever you can imagine. Whatever. Go. Just go live with us. Wait a minute. Come on, right. Go live with us.
They don't want to do that
on your merch. Yeah, that didn't.
Listening to us, that's probably pressing.
they're like, we can barely tolerate you guys for an hour or two.
Right. And our ears is bad enough, but
twice a week.
No, but yeah, we have some fun stuff. Yeah, it's cool.
I should probably stop at the announcements. I got to get better at this.
I'm looking at my show.
This is why Nate was supposed to take these over, is because Sean just not hacking anymore.
It's yeah. Well, this has been the first time with all 3 of us in 3 weeks. So yeah.
I'll get back on this horse and ride. I promise.
No, you won't. Well, my point is, no. But thank you for that. Good job. Good job, Sean.
You don't have to say that.
Okay. I retract it.
Mediocre job, Sean.
Nate, help us out, man, please.
You ever hear the story of the Titanic hitting the Odelberg? That's a rat.
And I know what happened. It's this sink the ship.
Glug.
The Odelberg. Okay. I know Zevin will appreciate that. And he'll probably go, yeah, pretty much. Other than when he was on, the saving grace. So, well, thank you, Nate, for that.
Yeah.
And we want to thank, of course, our creepies for listening to episode 60. That's really weird to say.
Wow.
I know. So thank you for keeping us going. And that was with our guest chat, Zevin Odelberg. He did awesome. He's a great guy. So give his Kinda Murdery podcast a listen. So I don't want to forget to mention that one more time. And until next time, creepies, Nate is your sound engineer, and we are your host, Todd and Sean, and we are middle-aged.
And creeped out. Keep it creepy.